Out of every mascot horror series, I believe that the Bendy franchise has had the most rocky history to date. They went from releasing one of the worst received mascot horror games in Bendy and the Ink Machine to releasing a surprisingly good follow-up with Bendy and the Dark Revival. With their new game being recently teased and shown off titled Bendy the Cage, and it looking to focus more on the horror side of things, it's looking up for the series as a whole. There is, however, one game in the series I have yet to mention, a game that almost nobody talks about. This game is titled Boris and the Dark Survival. While I myself have known of this spin-off game for quite some time, not many even refer to it or even acknowledge its existence. It's a very odd case to see, so I decided to do my research. Turns out this game has quite the reputation for not being so good. Since I've never played it personally, I decided to put this to the test. I started up my Steam, downloaded the game, and started playing it. The results I were greeted with are interesting to say the least. In this video, I'll be going over most if not all aspects of the game, including its gameplay, collectibles, and more. Before we get started, massive thanks on the support of the Lethal Company video. I even managed to get more people subscribed, so I couldn't thank you enough. With that out of the way, let's venture into the Ink world to check out Boris and the Dark Survival. Before we get into the gameplay and the main meat of this game, I want to go over the story to give you a brief idea so the gameplay clicks more. When we click new game, we get shown a cutscene depicting a story. It tells us about the parts of Bendy and the Ink Machine that Boris wasn't present in. We're told he spent this time traversing the ink world we roamed in looking for supplies to live off of. He was looking for scraps of any sort to get him by just a little longer. The Ink Demon, however, is looking for him in a similar fashion, stalking his every move to get a chance to annihilate him. And that's the story. There's no other story elements in this game to follow. This is all we get. Why, you may ask? Well, let's get into the gameplay and it'll all make sense. We start off the game in a hub world area. Yes, a hub area. We control our character with the usual WASD, and we have a sprint meter on the right hand side of our screen that will go down more and more as we use it. The meter doesn't automatically regenerate, however. The only way to replenish it is by going to vending machines we find and interacting with them to receive meat soup. This will bring our meter back to full, no matter the amount we have left. To start the actual gameplay of the game, we must navigate the hub area and use an old elevator to drop down into the lower levels of the Ink world. When we are dropped down, we are greeted with an environment that is extremely similar to the areas and rooms that we see in Bendy and the Ink Machine, as well as the Dark Revival. It still has that yellow wash over it and the inky black lines that we are familiar with. In terms of sound, there isn't really much to note. Most of the sounds we hear are a collection of industrial noises like metal pipes clicking and dripping water. Back to the map, there are many forking roads with some leading to dead ends, as we'll see when we search further. Rooms are decorated with many tables, pipes, and the previously mentioned vending machines and hiding spots. When down in this area, we only have one goal we must fulfill: grab all the scrapped items listed on the left of our screen, then get to the elevator as fast as possible. We must search these areas through and through. These supply items can be a variety of things, such as cogs, bones, spoons, and more. The location of these rooms is randomized as to where they will spawn. Searching for these items doesn't come without threat, however. The Ink Demon will be roaming the same inky halls that you are. They come with a mist of ink surrounding them and will chase you down to kill you when seen. There's only one way to avoid an inky death by the Ink Demon. Throughout the area will be scattered hiding spots you can jump into at any given moment. If you're ever in a pickle, you can just jump into the hiding booths and continue on with your day. However, there are many problems with this and the rest of the Ink Demon's mechanics. For starters, the Ink Demon is very slow. You can easily outsprint him by a wide margin, and even if you run out of sprint meter, your walking speed is just about the same as the Ink Demon's, meaning that if you have a large enough gap between you, you can still beat him out into a hiding booth. Another thing is that it doesn't matter how late you get into it. The AI will just straight up lose sight of you if you go into one. I'm starting to see a trend between mascot horror games. This in turn removes almost all the threat or fear of dying immediately after you realize just how easy it is to avoid them. I realized this fairly quickly when playing for the first time, and it felt like a walk in the park after I found out. Combine this with there being no other threat in the game besides the ink demon, and the game has little to no difficulty whatsoever. Most of the time I just casually walk through the area despite hearing the ink demon close by. They're so avoidable and easy to deal with that there really isn't a point in the gameplay at all. The only time you'll potentially get killed is when you're boxed up in a room or the ink demon is blocking the doorway. To be honest, it's pretty boring. Once you collect all the parts you need, the ink demon will instantly be aware of your location and you must make a mad dash to the elevator to leave with your supplies. This chase isn't much difficult either. Besides sometimes being unlucky and getting cut off by the ink demon, there isn't much to worry about here. And the area isn't too big, so finding your way back shouldn't be trouble either. The second you click the interact key with the elevator, you can no longer be killed by the ink demon, once again removing threat from the game. Overall, little to no difficulty whatsoever. Once you go back up on the elevator, you'll be brought back to the hub world, where you'll be prompted to drop off the supplies you collected in the hub's supply box. Once you do, all the progress you made is saved. Now you want to know the funny part about this? That's the game. You heard me. That's the entire game. No new story? That's really it. When going back through the elevator, you'll be greeted with a very similar layout as before, with the supplies being in different places and a little room movement. When I discovered this for the first time, it was pretty surprising to say the least. I did do some research and did discover the ability to unlock new areas, layouts, and even some different enemies that replace the ink demon, but even then the enemies function in the exact same way as the ink demon, so the difficulty is roughly the same. They act essentially as a reskin with differences that barely matter, and that kinda sucks. It got me thinking as to why this game felt so hollow and bare bones. I know spin-offs don't have a reputation for being exactly high budget, but my point still stands. And that's when it hit me. I researched a little bit, then I found the answer to my question. Boris and the Dark Survival is a mobile game port. I'm kind of ashamed I didn't realize this sooner, seeing how the game presents itself, but now this makes so much more sense. It's so short because it's an endless level mobile game. Now that we know this fact, that begs the question, what even is the point of playing this game anymore? And to that I have the answer. In the hub world, you will see areas that have a counter above them, signifying collectibles that you can find while exploring the ink world. The whole goal of this game, besides obtaining supplies, is to get collectibles for your personal sake as well as unlock new areas to explore. Admittedly, this is better than what I thought the game was going to be like, but there still is a part of the game that is nagging on me, the gameplay loop. It feels so unsatisfying to play and becomes repetitive rather quickly. This got me thinking on how the gameplay loop could be more digestible and more satisfying to play. I've come up with 2 big additions and changes as a solution to the game's many problems. I think that these ideas could make the game from an absolute mess to a fun, replayable experience that people could actively enjoy. No time to waste, let's get into them. Point 1, a progression system. One thing that I think could give this game a ton of replayability is putting a proper progression system in place for the player. It doesn't have to be overly complicated, just something to give the player incentive to continue forward rather than dropping the game after 2 seconds. In terms of length, I believe a solid 25 levels to traverse through would be a good balance of giving you more to play as well as not boring you. The levels will be split up into 5 layout types to go through, which you will discover as you continue. The different layout types will have 5 levels dedicated to them before you go on to the next. I'll put a graphic up on screen to display what I mean. For example, you'll go through 5 levels of the first layout type that we see in the original game. Once you complete the 5th level, you will go further down to the next level type, and so on and so forth. You must collect all the scrap necessary in each level to progress further. In lore, I think it would be a cool idea to have the scrap you collect from the levels be used to modify the elevator to bring you down further. This not only gives a cool reason as to why Boris is doing this in the first place, but also ties into the progression design I had in mind. Just in case you missed the randomly generated layouts from the base game, an endless mode will be available upon completion of the main campaign. If you love the gameplay that much, then it lets you continue on if you don't want to replay the story again. Additionally, each level in the campaign will have a unique design and layout to that level. None of the campaign levels will be randomly generated like the original game. I believe this would be a massive benefit to the game as a whole, and make each level more unique and enjoyable. Now on to my next point. Point 2, enemy variety. While I am aware that the Ink Demon role changes characters in some layouts during the original game, it's not enough of a difference in mechanics to make the game better. Even besides the Ink Demon role, I believe that having more than one threat during a run would add to the overall experience. For starters, the Ink Demon role characters should have significant differences between each other. I think unique mechanics to each character would be a great change for the gameplay loop. While I don't know exactly what the mechanics would be from my own thoughts, I do have 1 or 2 ideas. With Alice Angel, she could possibly have a projectile ability, with it being a nod to her signature Tommy gun from the main games. The projectionist could have the ability to only see in front of it, making it more avoidable by simply walking around it. The catch, however, would be an increased running speed when chasing you. It would be easier to avoid but harder to stay away from when you're seen. The little ideas and changes like this would really improve the game overall. One thing that I would like to change with all of them is a better jump scare animation. The screen suddenly going completely black and then a janky jump scare animation playing really isn't doing it for me. Instead of making the sudden black screen, perhaps making the jump scare more gradual instead of super sudden would improve it. The last change I have with the Ink Demon role is making the hiding spots less overpowered. If you're seen going into a hiding spot by the Ink Demon, I feel like there should be a little consequence for it. If you're spotted by the Ink Demon but aren't seen going in a hiding spot, then you won't be caught. If you are seen, however, you will be snatched from where you hide and killed in the process. This will improve the problems I have with the character AI. Now let's move on to some new enemy types that I think would add to the experience. I know, this is the second time I've made concepts for a video game on the channel, but bear with me here. My first idea for a new enemy type would be the blob enemies from Bendy and the Ink Machine and Dark Revival respectively. Their mechanic is simple. When seen by one of them, they will chase you and upon catching you will hold you in place with their body, slowing you down. To get out, you'd have to mash a button to break free. This would serve as an inconvenience to the player and help the Ink Demon catch them. Plus it'd be cool to see more characters from the main games in this game. One last enemy type that would be cool is a creature that moved the supplies around the map. I think the Butcher Gang would fit this role quite well. While I am aware they are present in the original game, I think this role would fit them far better. How they would work is they would find your supplies you're supposed to collect and proceed to run off with it and put it in a different spot. While they can't actually harm you, they do kinda suck to deal with. That's all the points I have to offer. The purpose of these points is to come up with new ways on how to improve the game as a whole from its current state. I think that these would make the game not only bearable, but actually fun to progress in and replay. This game was something I didn't expect to experience. Its entire gameplay loop and style is lacking in many areas and definitely needs some reworking. So, to answer the question, is it really as bad as people say? I would have to be inclined to say yes. This is the embodiment of a cheap mobile game that was ported over to PC. I have little to praise about this game other than its art style, which I've always liked from the Bendy games anyway. Overall, do not play this game. It's for your own sake. You'll feel exactly the same way as before you played it, if not even worse. Even despite playing this and thoroughly thinking it's lackluster and boring, I still think the Dark Revival is a fantastic game and I can't wait for Bendy the Cage. If you want to have a fun experience, go play the Dark Revival instead. Now, on a less sour note, thank you to everyone who watched this far in the video. Without your support, I wouldn't be making video essays and enjoying them nearly as much, so I express my gratitude to you all. If you like this video, consider subscribing. The channel has grown quite a bit since my first video, and I would love to have more people to show off my content to and thought process to. It would also help me grow my content structure more, so that's a plus. Well, that's all from me. Until next time, cheers!